The following is a summary with quotes and commentary on Approaching the Unconscious by C.G. Jung. This is the first part of a book, Man and His Symbols, written later in Carl Jung's life to describe his life's work in the vernacular of a layperson. In this book, Carl Jung conveys that humans use words in addition to symbols and signs as a means of communication. A sign is something recognizable and has acquired cultural meaning through repetitive exposure, whereas a symbol is much deeper and even unconscious, used to represent that which cannot be described by mere words, for man can never comprehend any aspect of life to its fullest degree. Man is capable of generating symbols primarily through dreams, where many wild things seem to occur, yet may have deeper hidden meaning. Jung argues that there is indeed two personalities within the human psyche, one conscious and one unconscious. The whole point of the psyche is to have a part of the self, and therefore existence, as unknown. Self-control and self-knowledge is a rare and remarkable quality, but he also argues that self-control can be seen as a negative quality by some, limiting the full spectrum of human experience. As an introduction into the idea of symbolism, Jung references Sigmund Freud and Joseph Breuer's groundwork into the insight of pain and abnormal behavior being symbolically meaningful. Trouble swallowing when the patient can't swallow the situation. Asthma when a patient cannot breathe the atmosphere at home. A psychosomatic paralysis of the legs when he can't go on anymore. Vomiting when one cannot digest some unpleasant fact. However, the most pure and unfiltered manifestation of symbols appears in the form of dreams. Through some probing, dreams can usually be boiled down to some basic patterns. A conscious story has a beginning, development, and an end, but the same is not true of a dream. Time and space is not the same, therefore to understand its hidden meaning, it must be viewed from all possible angles. Being opposed to simple free association was a large awakening in Jung's analytical process. When a patient were to free associate, Jung would make sure that it led directly back to the dream itself. He would often find himself telling a patient, "Let's get back to your dream. What does the dream say?" When you can't remember what you were going to say, the thought still exists, but in fact has just gone unconscious. Much like we listen to a note, the sound seems to stop at regular intervals, but in fact is just our attention fading in and out. Much like a car that has turned the corner and is out of sight, though it still affects our conscious mind, like walking into a room and forgetting why you went in. Forgetting is a normal process. Certain conscious ideas lose their specific energy because attention can be deflected, much like a searchlight lights up one area by leaving the other in darkness. The unconscious has taken note of things that we have consciously forgotten. They influence the way we react to both events and people. Even something as simple as a smell or a sound could vividly call back long-forgotten memories from childhood. Sometimes we could even unconsciously plagiarize creative material without even having conscious memory of so much as consuming the material. Jung cites a specific example of Nietzsche doing this in his book, Thus Spake Zarathustra, and even confirmed it with his sister, who was still alive at the time. Each individual word means something slightly different to each person, even among those who share the same cultural background. It is received in an individual context and is applied in an individual way. Even seemingly simple concepts like numbers are much more than you take them to be, for they have been associated with different mythological and even divine elements throughout the ages. In our conscious thoughts, we restrain ourselves within the limits of rational statements that are less colorful because we have stripped them of most of their psychic associations. It's Jung's assertion that modern man would be much less equipped than the primitive man to handle any type of divine, spiritual, or unexplainable encounter because of our attachments to rational thought. Worldly ways and norms expose us to all kinds of influences. Such things seduce us into following ways that are unsuitable for our individuality. We are defenseless against the world, especially those who are extroverted and place emphasis on external objects. With too much false influence, the gap will widen into neurotic dissociation, far removed from healthy instincts, nature, and truth, leading to an artificial life. Dreams, however, help reestablish the total psychic equilibrium, only to be disregarded to one's own detriment. Many crises in our lives has a long and unconscious history, leading to a seeming precognition of dreams. We move toward them step by step, ever unaware except in the unconscious. The gains of modern society have been made at the price of enormous losses, whose extent we have scarcely begun to estimate. Jung argues that man has retained his instinct from primal man, and yet it has gone unconscious in place of rational thought and self-control, and now only reveals themselves in the form of dream images. He uses the term compensating function of dreams. Unconscious and conscious must be integrally connected and move on parallel lines, lest we fall into a state of psychological disturbance. Dreams are carriers from the instinctive to the rational mind, so that it may relearn the forgotten language of the instincts. Some common dream motifs include flying, falling, being persecuted by humans or animals, being naked in public, being in a hurry, being defenseless, running hard and going nowhere, but all must be explored in the context of the dream. Jung further clarifies that signs are something that is less than the concept represents, and symbols are something that stands for more than its obvious and immediate meaning. Symbols are not created consciously, they are spontaneous manifestations. Examples of collective symbols are chiefly religious. He describes in depth through stories and examples that the individual is the only reality when it comes to analysis. There are no shortcuts or one-size-fits-all treatment methods. But why can dreams not just say what they want to say, he had often been asked. Could dreams be a guardian of sleep? Then why are they often so disturbing? It looks as if the approach to consciousness has a blotting out effect upon the subliminal contents of the such. Being subliminal loses clarity of definition, more analogous and incomprehensible. There is no difference between organic and psychic growth, so meaning and purposelessness are not the prerogative of the mind. Archetypes and mythology are attempts to form a motif through dreams, and knowledge of which can assist a great deal in analysis. People do things without knowing why they do things, like traditions of Easter eggs and Christmas trees. Jung says that things had to be done first, and only a long time after someone finally asked why, much like in our own lives. Invent comes from the Latin word to find, meaning that it was known even then that to invent something is merely to find a way to bring it into reality, that is to say, an existing archetype into manifestation. The primitive man is weighed down by fears and superstition every step of the way, but the contemporary man pays the price by lack of introspection. The demons have not disappeared, they just now have new names. Denial is just as impossible as assertion to prove that God exists. We are free to choose in an arbitrary decision. However, thoughts that we can't prove have shown to be useful. They are general ideas and convictions that will give meaning to a man's life. The primitive storyteller is not so different from today's poets or philosophers. If people lose meaning in their lives, their social organization disintegrates and they themselves morally decay. Man's contact with nature has gone, and with it the profound emotional energy the connection supplied. This enormous loss is compensated for by the symbols of our dreams. The original mind is just as much functioning in the child as the evolutionary stages of mankind are in its embryonic body. Psychology is the only science that has to take the factor of feelings into account. It is the link between physical events and life. A folly of modern man is to assume that consciousness is sense and the unconscious is nonsense. Do microbes make sense or nonsense? Humanity is heading toward disaster, and there are no longer any gods we can evoke to help us. Reason is our greatest and most tragic illusion. It tells us we have conquered nature, which could never be true. Jung concludes by saying, dreams provide the most interesting information for those who take the trouble to understand their symbols. Thank you for listening.